Thank you. I am so honored you downloaded the Thrive with Nancy podcast. My intention is to provide insights that will fast-track your career as an executive woman. Our topic is perception, creating or barricading. You'll fully grasp how powerful your mind is at both creating and barricading through this podcast. It's your choice which side of the mentality equation you live. Let me begin unwrapping what I mean. Recently, I ran smack dab into an interpretation issue that changed my view in a nanosecond. Picture this. I was swaying on the swing in the backyard. The sweet tranquility of the sun and the breeze put a satisfied smile on my face. All was right in my slice of the world until, at first dimly and then with an increase in timbre, I heard a sound that I couldn't quite identify. Oh, I reflected in recognition. How delightful! Geese honking as they fly upriver. Nature adding song to my already pleasant afternoon, thought I. After several moments of appreciation, I noticed the sound getting louder, almost as though the geese were swooping down over my backyard. I looked around to appreciate the sight when through the fence slats my eyes noticed an old, rusty, three-wheel bike pedaling noisily along the bike path. In an instant, nature's gift of geese honking turned into a very different experience as my perception of the event spun on its axis. The joy of nature morphed into the nitty-gritty jarring sound of civilization. That's the power of perception. You believe you're right until you're not. This occasion was humorous and didn't impact my career or my life at all. But rarely are the ones you experience at work so innocuous. You see, the good part of perception is all part of developing a vision for your future, or building up your confidence, or has you bonding with a fellow executive based on belief in them, or allows you to open-mindedly discuss your approximating thoughts of an emerging marketplace, or identifying major trends coming down the pike that will impact your career, or that will impact your division or your company. Those that have learned to test their perceptions regarding people and business are more successful. Conversely, how often, rather than being open, are you listening or interpreting situation simply to confirm what you already know? You see, when you compare the information you're receiving against what you currently believe, well, with this mindset, you never give yourself a chance to learn anew, nor are you allowing fresh thoughts to penetrate your mind, creating new game-changing ahas. Are your perceptions and assumptions regarding work and people negatively impacting your career, or are they supporting you? Are you actively working on identifying your biases and viewpoints that are holding your career from being all it could be? The reality is that perception and assumptions have a lot more to do with your career success than you might imagine. Time to look at where some of your misperceptions come from. I call this the explanation gap. And Aldous Huxley alludes to this phenomenon when he says, there are things known and there are things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. Our mind automatically fills any gap between the known and the unknown with what we believe to be so. It goes like this. An interaction takes place, and we have an expectation of a subsequent interaction occurring. If the second interaction never transpires, or the outcome is different than expected, an explanation gap ensues. The in-between is caused by unknowingness, uncertainty, or unexpectedness. As we encounter the explanation gap, or vacuum of understanding, our minds quickly floods it with plausible reasoning. In reality, you are just guessing as a way to create a story that your mind accepts as a temporary reality until the real facts emerge. If you're self-confident, you're more likely to fill the gap with empowering thoughts. However, If your belief in self is diminished even a little bit and underdeveloped, you'll find yourself cramming that gap with negative stories that are disempowering and destructive to your career. Explanation gaps occur all day long. Think about yourself. What thoughts are you filling your gaps with? Shift your internal dialogue. That's where change always takes place first. Start stuffing that insidious explanation gap of yours with dialogue that empowers you to stand front and center as the proud, powerful being that you truly are. And if you haven't heard me say this before, studies reveal that confidence often counts as a promotion factor in business more than your skills. Not something I, as a woman, enjoy sharing, but confidence does influence the final decision. If you're filling your explanation gap with uninspiring thoughts, you definitely won't be exuding confidence. Ellen Langer, a professor of psychology at Harvard University, highlights this point when she says, "It is not our physical state that limits us. It is our mindset about our own limits, our perceptions, that draws the line in the sand." Throughout history, it's through expanding the lines in the sand that breakthrough occurs. I woke up this morning remembering my own line in the sand moment. So many years ago, I can't even name the year. But had I not said yes, I wouldn't be who you know me to be today. Elizabeth St. James was an older woman and well-versed, much more so than I. Out of nowhere, she asked me to co-lead the job club held weekly at the church, reverberating through my head along with the wave of shyness that held me back for years. With my preference of being an introvert and so many reasons why my perception of myself were screaming, "No!" as I uncertainly said yes. I took the first step of moving past my line in the sand to generate a future today that is filled with fulfillment and passion and supporting others to increase their possibilities. Are you thinking I'm an anomaly? It couldn't possibly work for you? Think again. Have any of you heard about George Danzig? He was a doctoral candidate at the University of California, Berkeley. I hadn't heard of him either until I heard his story. One day he came running into class late, noticed 2 math problems written on the blackboard, which he assumed was homework. It was a daunting assignment and took several days to complete. He even apologized to his professor as he turned in his homework, thinking he should have gotten it done much faster. A few days later, he and his wife were awakened by loud knocking on the door. It was his professor excitedly saying, "I've just written an introduction to one of your papers. Read it so I can send it out right away for publication." Yes, you got it. What Danzig had assumed was homework, problems on the blackboard that he had to work on, were in fact 2 famous unsolved problems in statistics, which he had just solved. Wow. If he'd heard that they were unsolvable, as did his classmates, I doubt Danzig would ever have unlocked the code. But he unknowingly stepped across a line in the sand when he assumed it could be done, and breakthrough occurred. Now it's time to examine the other side of perception. Not you looking at yourself, but the view others have of you. Because what you're thinking and believing, whether right or wrong, is reality to them, and it can harm your career if you don't do something about it. I often believe stories open the door to illumination. So let me share how perception negatively impacted a client of mine. Morgan was recruited away from a company for a position that both challenged her and was in an area of her passions. After 6 months, she was still thrilled, but concerned. She was hired to get a critical off-track international endeavor back on track. It required a ton of global travel. The project was going well, but after a couple of months, Morgan was hearing some unsettling comments from her interim boss. he brought up her travel several times. From her point of view, it was evident the project's continued improvement depended on her face-to-face interactions with the various stakeholders. Morgan knew at the same time her company was restricting expenses, including travel, so provided her interim boss with the facts, figures, and statistics validating the travel expenses. Yet the topic repeatedly came up in conversation with her interim boss, and in meetings with her peers, and even through the administrative assistant's persistent questioning. It showed up in direct comments, disturbing subtle jabs, and at other times, small, insignificant, jealous quips. The nitpicking was driving her crazy, and had her thinking she'd made a wrong career decision. I suggested to Morgan that somehow her interim boss and others in her new organization had gained an impression that she thrived on travel. They perhaps perceived she was squeezing out every opportunity to increase her time on the road. I advised, you're going to have to water drop comments about how there is much more travel in this position than anticipated, not as a whine, but just as a fact. Or the need has been challenging for this much travel for she and her family. Or muse out loud about ideas and ways of getting the job done through non-travel options. Or solicit ideas for getting the same improvement stats while cutting down on travel. She started water dropping madly. An amazing shift occurred. Her interim boss stopped bugging her and started encouraging her to see people face to face. A wrong perception that was harming her transformed through these water drops. The challenge is that you're responsible for turning around misperceptions as soon as you recognize them. After all, it is your career they're harming. And along the pathway of others understanding you better, you may gain insights about them. In Morgan's case, she was able to shift the opinion others had of her, and while doing so, she came to accept the interim boss's need to walk a thin line. He wanted to be named boss for real, so aligning himself with the company's tightened budget was essential, and he wanted the project to be successful. Morgan learned to partner with the boss for both of them to thrive in their positions. Let's conclude this discussion with a simple experiment of Ellen Langer, the psychologist out of Harvard University mentioned earlier. This shift in perception demonstrates how a shift in your perception improves the results you produce. It reveals how easily we allow our brain to hold us smaller than we were ever created to be. Let me set the stage. Envision going into your eye doctor for an examination. Your doctor runs you through a myriad of tests, and then up pops the eye chart. And you're asked, how far down can you read? Langer showed that merely by inverting the eye chart so that the large E is on the bottom, people can read letters they couldn't before. Because the standard eye chart gets progressively smaller, she says it tells you soon you are not going to be able to see. What E can you turn upside down in your career so that your perceptions will have you being all that you were created to be? Your mind is far more powerful than you ever credit. What unsolvable problem will you now crack? Are you ready to convert your explanation gap with supportive assumptions rather than negative ones? Are you ready to cross that line in the sand? How are you going to take responsibility for being seen and experienced as you truly are? Because I hope you understand this is your duty. Start right away making a difference, because that is something that will give you the foundation for success today and into the future. Thanks for listening with an open mind. If you enjoyed this, please tell others about Thrive with Nancy Podcast and check out my other episodes. For additional resources, visit ThriveWithNancy.com, a powerful resource for women executives. Much success. I'm thrilled you've listened to the Thrive with Nancy podcast. My intention is to offer quick tips designed for you to apply right away, ones that will boost your career immediately. I bet you're already considering ways to implement these new ideas. Perfect! Now, if you do me a favor, pass the podcast link on to those who will benefit, your friends and coworkers. Thanks so much.